Companies are investing, consumers are spending, American manufacturing, energy, technology, autos, all are booming. And thanks to the decisions that we've made and the grit and resilience of the American people, we've recovered faster and come farther from the recession than almost any other advanced country on earth.
The word of the day is Keynesian. It goes with word economics, and it's all about money, something we all have an interest in. The world is changing every single day from that economic standpoint, I should say, and we need to be aware of who is getting it right, who is getting it wrong. Welcome back to MidPoint, the senior economic consultant for Euro-Pacific Capital and one who has a hearty grasp on that part of the world and how it reaches around the globe. John Browne joins us again. Pleasure to see you, John.
Good pleasure to see you too, Ed.
Let's get right to it, because what is Keynesian economics? If you say that to the normal person, they will look at you and go, excuse me? Try me a few dozen more times. Simple language.
Well, in the old days, like in the 19th century, when enormous wealth was created in America and Britain and Europe, economists relied on Adam Smith's Wealth of Nations and Jean-Baptiste Say, the famous French economist, who both held that production is what creates wealth, production, and creates its own demand. But in 1936, John Maynard Keynes came up with a frightfully complex and I think foolhardy thing called the general theory, and he dismissed both Adam Smith and Jean-Baptiste Say and maintained that what you need to do is create demand by pumping in more money and lowering interest rates. And of course, that's exactly what we've done.
Welcome to America and the Fed.
Yeah, and to Britain and Europe, but particularly the America and the Fed. And since then, what has happened is America has gone from being the richest country in history ever to being the world's largest debtor. It has 50 million people on food stamps, which 20 or 30 years ago would have been called soup kitchens. Its debt is now lost AAA status, and it borrows at more cost than Germany. Who would have thought that after 1945? And its currency has depreciated by 99.8% since the Fed opened its doors in 1914.
Okay, wait a minute, I'm going to do something here, and then this is radical indeed. I'm going to try to use a little common sense here, which in economics, of course, we know does not work whatsoever. But what you are putting forth here would seem to me to be, to the common person, the absolute wrong way to run an economy. I think you could find somebody who could even work a calculator who would tell you that. Yeah. So then why does it remain right now the core of what Janet Yellen and others are doing right now at the Fed and other countries?
Because in the Great Depression, when Keynes came out with his theory, and of course if you and I we'd saved a lot of money and we'd done very well in business and everything, but suddenly we hit a problem, so we start to borrow a lot. To start with, of course, it works magnificently. Suddenly all this money comes in, we can buy a new car and new trucks and tractors and everything else, but time comes eventually to pay it back. But you and I have to pay it back or we go to jail. But governments, all they do is print more money and borrow more, and then when borrowing reaches a limit, they print money out of nowhere, just thin air. And that is what's happening. And now consumers and businessmen are worried, very worried, so worried that when they're given a negative real return for a bank deposit, they still put money in the bank rather than spend it because they're shocked.
All right, now this comes down to gross domestic product. This comes down a little bit to GDP, and I want to just give everybody here, listen to this. Now, some experts think in the U.S. the GDP will be revised down in the coming months. Lance Roberts, chief strategist at STA Wealth Management, says part of the GDP number was actually inventory building, not true sales of products. Take a listen.
Real fixed sales that are coming across, those are the actual sales of products, those are down over the last quarter, as well as gross domestic income, which ticked up slightly, but over the last couple of quarters, that's also on the decline as well, and is at levels that are normally associated with very weak economies. So the income side and the final sales side of the GDP report was really kind of belied by the government spending part and the component of inventory rebuilds.
All right, put all that in English for us right now, right or wrong?
Well, I think he's absolutely right, but essentially what happens when you and I drive a motor car, we concentrate on the speed, in other words, the output, right, GDP. Mm-hmm. But what economists should be counting on is like a racing car driver. In a racing car, there is no speedometer at all. There is a rev counter with a big red line on it, which says if your needle goes past that, you risk blowing the engine, a temperature gauge and a pressure gauge. So it's the only instruments. because the racing car driver is interested in production of power, not just the result of outside demand, in other words, speed. And that is what we should be concentrating on. We should be concentrating with the Fed at the moment. It concentrates on spending a lot of money, on stimulation, and on discouraging saving by lowering interest rates so that people are losing money in the bank. What Go and the Austrian school of economists from which I come, we feel that savings are essential for healthy business investment and real productivity and wealth creation, as it proved throughout the whole of the 19th century until Maynard Keynes came along. Unfortunately, he was given the accolade for getting out of the recession or the Great Depression, which I think was a false accolade, but nonetheless, his policies became the mantra for all economists nearly all today, and of course the mantra of Janet Yellen at the Fed, who sees him as a hero. I see him as a total disaster who's landed the world for the last 50 and 60 years in complete trouble. When I look at 50 million people on food stamps, I think that's an absolute measure of disaster. When I see America with more debt than its GDP, I see it as disaster.
Now, you've just put it all in very simple English, and anybody can understand that. You have Janet Yellen in the Fed sitting right there. She's one who loves the Keynesian model. She absolutely gets along with it, and it's not working. So what is it that gets somebody, or how do you then drive the people who listen to say, wait a minute, she's got it wrong. There's a different way to do it, because they seem to be following like lemmings to the sea. It sounds good and it all works, so let's keep doing it. How do you break the cycle?
It's very difficult because it's marvelous. Everybody wants more money, and if someone's away printing it all off, not even printing it anymore, we couldn't print it fast enough with all the printing presses in the entire world can't print trillions a year. It has to be done, it's click money. It's just all on a computer. And of course we feel richer with $100,000 more in the bank, but the dollars are worth less and less, and we're heading for real disaster. None of them, the disaster is so big that governments say we can't face this disaster possibly, so print more money. And it's going to end, I think, very sadly. And what it means is there's going to be abject poverty, and of course, as always happens, the poor suffer the most.
John, you're not giving us any optimism whatsoever here.
Well, the optimism would be, in my view, if we had single-term politicians that would pass legislation like the Bowles-Simpson plan. But it will never pass unless you have single-term politicians, because some of the medicine is tough. You know, we're now overweight, even more overweight than I am, and we have to diet. Well, the diet is very tough to do, particularly at the beginning.
Well, we've talked about this now, but I have to come back. I got to pull you back just a little bit here, because we're going to try to make sure that we don't leave everybody here thinking as if they're worth about $1.93 right now, or the way it sounds. You said it's very tough in order to change where we're at right now. You've talked, and most of the economists that I've spoken to agree, we are heading for a complete and utter disaster at this point. Give us at least a little hope, one or two things that can be done, that should be done, that maybe can't change it overnight, but infiltrate the model a little. Try to work it around a little bit. John, give us something, please, man.
Well, in Britain, the hope is the United Kingdom Independence Party, and there other politicians will grab their ideas and save Britain a great deal of money and create prosperity. In America, it's the Tea Party. But even the Republicans won't accept the Tea Party. The Tea Party isn't even a party. It is grassroots Americans who see the disaster looming and do not want to go on contributing to the disaster by giving the money, more and more tax money to the government to spend unwisely. Why not give it to entrepreneurs, leave it in their pockets? If we had a flat rate of tax and left people and companies with much more money at hand, they're the people who know how to spend it best. Who gives a government official any idea of all these different industries that are around, how to make profits, how to beat tremendous competition from China and India and Russia and everywhere else? I mean, they have no idea.
Well, fair to
I say no idea. Look at the economy. They've got no idea about that, so how would they know how to run a business?
Well, fair to say we make government officials, we make our elected officials out to be economic wizards. How many of them actually know much about economics when they are elected? Not many.
Not
actually.
Many. And the tragedy is, it's rather like the global warming hoax. People daren't speak against it. If anyone wants to get on in economics at university in America or Britain, if they mention Adam Smith or say that they get 0. If they mention Keynes, they get 100%. And it's the same once they get out of university in all the government departments. They mention anything about Keynes that's negative, they're out of a job or shuffled off to the side.
Okay, then we'll keep our...
Like Ernest Lerner was
like
justifiably.
just exactly right. Flat tax end, we'll start there. We're all out of time, unfortunately, but next time back, we'll continue to hammer
Flat
away and
tax
away
and
and away.
single-term politicians.
Flat tax and single-term politicians. I like both of those, John. Stay right there. Outstanding. Remember those, Washington, because we're coming for you. John's coming for you. All right, later on this hour, the band director who got hung out to dry by the university amid the latest hazing scandal. And after the break, flashback. That and a whole lot more coming up right here on MidPoint, where every day we question everything.